Hello everyone! In this video I'm going to rank the most popular subgenres of fantasy. Let's start! You see, I put my fantasy dress. No, I don't have a fantasy dress, but this is like the best I can do right now. Okay, so I have listed just 10 of the most popular fantasy genres. Let's talk about them. First is sword and sorcery, which is usually a very fun one. So I'll put it in, I love it because it has adventure, it has magic, it has wizards, it has all the fun stuff. How not to love it? So I really enjoy this genre. I want to read more from it. And then we have high fantasy. Like high fantasy, I'll put in suburb because maybe sword and sorcery, it's a bit more like, I don't know, the worlds there might be not so complicated and the stakes might not be so high. Maybe just the kingdom is in danger, right? And the knights and the princess have to fight the evil wizards, you know? But high fantasy is just more epic, right? High fantasy, epic fantasy, there are these large worlds and these large conflicts and usually a large cast of characters and the stakes are so high. I just love high fantasy. It was Lord of the Rings that really made me like fantasy, and I feel like up to this day it's my favorite fantasy book. I'm not sure if it's the best fantasy book, but for me it's my favorite. I still really love it. So yeah, high fantasy is the best. Then we have cozy fantasy. Cozy fantasy, I think it's a bit... I'm not sure if it's just put it in meh or in okay. Just for variety, I'll put it in C. Because honestly, for cozy, it's something I kind of like to experience. Like, if you ask me in which fantasy world I want to go to live in, then I would pick a cozy fantasy book any day. Because I would love to, you know, hang out with the elves, have beer with some trolls, discuss world politics with wizards and stuff like that. I don't want to go to war, you know. The idea of cozy fantasy, it's so nice. Just to hang out in this world and enjoy it and talk to magical creatures and just, you know, chill there. But at the same time, reading an entire novel about this, it just feels a bit boring to me. I don't know. Maybe I haven't found a cozy fantasy that I really enjoy, or maybe just cozy stories are not exactly my thing. I like more the idea of having a cozy fantasy game. You know, you grow your potatoes and you go on a small quest. That's kind of casual game, like mobile game where I'm like in Hobbiton and I collect my carrots. It'll be still more engaging because it's a game, so you have to, you know, do something. But I don't know. It just feels less interesting than the other genres. That's why I'm gonna put it lower, just to have variety. But something that is cozy for me, it's actually fairy tales. Fairy tales are superb, okay? Fairy tales or fairy tales retellings, they can have more conflict and more drama, but still feel more magical, which kind of feels more cozy to me. Even if you have, I don't know, Sleeping Beauty retelling with evil sorceress who is trying to kill everyone, it's still, because it's in this fairy tale world, it kind of feels more cozy. I don't know how to explain it. It just, for me, when I was little, I really loved fairy tales, so I still find comfort in fairy tale like worlds. Even in the dark and scary ones, I find them so interesting and so fun to read and so comfortable. So grimdark, I would say that grimdark, it's okay. Why? I'll explain. I think what I don't like so much about grimdark is that it could lean too much in the desire to be greedy, to show people's worst sides sometimes. And I feel like some authors really want to be greedy and dark and shocking and provocative and to have a lot of blood and bloodshed, which is okay, but some of them are just doing it for darkness sake. Like how to say it, like, I want to be cool and gritty and so everybody's gonna be terrible. Oh, people are terrible. No, there's no hope. Everything is terrible. And I don't like that. I don't like when something is taken to the extreme. But if it's a grimdark and it has nuanced characters, interesting plot, a gritty world, but still that this gritty world has some little sparkles of hope and beauty and niceness, then I would like it. For example, I really like Game of Thrones. Okay, I have not read the books, but I like the show. I like the characters. Maybe the finale not so much, but like the first few seasons, I loved it. I loved the entire world and everything going on there. It's just that I feel like when we talk about fantasy, grimdark is not my favorite, but I could love it a lot if it's done well. Because what is cool about grimdark is that sometimes it could show more layered and complex characters. It could show a more dangerous world, and if it's done well, it could be really good. But if it's just tough, greedy, grumpy characters killing each other, then I get bored pretty quickly. So for me, grimdark is a very hit or miss. Like, I could really like it if it's done well, and I can really not like it if it's just dark for darkness sake, you know what I mean? So maybe I don't like those extremes. Like, cozy fantasy is like one extreme. Everything is sunshine and rainbows, and grimdark is the other extreme. Everything is like dark and dirty and greedy. Like, those extremes are not my favorite. I like when it's more in the middle, where it's more balanced, when we have a bit of everything, because I feel the world is a mix of those two extremes. You can have, the same magical realm. You can have, like, I don't know, up in the mountain, people are living happily, like Hobbiton, you know, you have Hobbiton, it's a cozy fantasy, and then you go to Mordor, and it's a pretty grimdark there with the orcs, you know. So you can have those two extremes in the same world. You can have those two stories in the same world, and they're both realistic in their own environment. But I like when those two things meet and collide, like the Lord of the Rings, the cozy fantasy characters suddenly goes to grimdark Mordor and he has adventures. So when those things are mixed together, it's my favorite combination. But yeah, I talked too much about it. Now let's go to urban fantasy. Urban fantasy, it's okay, but it's not my favorite. Just urban fantasy, it's a bit too realistic sometimes, and it's too close to our world. I don't mind it, but if it's urban fantasy, it's harder for me to get into it because it feels just less magical than the other ones. I prefer a completely different world. But sci-fi fantasy, I love it. I'm such a big fan of Star Wars, and in my eyes, Star Wars is a sci-fi fantasy because you have wizards and magic and spaceships, you know. It's cool. It could be great. I love sci-fi fantasy, but I feel it's maybe harder to do than fantasy because you have to balance so many things, like the technology, the magic, the worlds. It could get messy. The world building could get messy. So I applaud all those authors who managed to strike gold with it, because I feel like it's hard to make a world that feels real in such a circumstances where you have maybe advanced technology and magic or different planets. So let's go to dark fantasy, like a fantasy that can be very full of magical stuff, like magic dragons, magical creatures and everything, but to have some more darker themes. And I love dark fantasy because it allows for more serious tone. It allows for the words to feel more dangerous. It allows for more darker undertones. Nowadays, when we speak about dark fantasy, it's usually dark fantasy romance. I like the idea of it. I like a dark romance with dangerous protagonists or questionable moral choices and stuff. But I don't really like when the love interest is like a real bastard, you know? Like, okay, if he's like a warrior with troubled past who had to fight his enemies and he's killed many people, but it was to protect his kingdom, like I could accept that. But if he's just some kind of a abuser, over possessive or jealous creep, I do not like it. That's just my personal opinions. So now let's see Portal fantasy. Portal fantasy, it's okay. I think when I was younger, I enjoyed Portal fantasy more, like the idea that you can just go into another world, like open your door and find yourself in another world. Now I feel like it depends how it is made. If you start in our world and then you open a door to another world, it almost feels like this other world is some kind of metaphor of their problem, and they go to this other world to solve their real life problem, and it feels less of fantasy and more of like self-discovery journey. That that just feels less of fantasy to me. It feels more contemporary. Even if there is a portal to another world, it feels like that to me. But maybe if there's two different worlds that have nothing to do with ours and the characters can pass through them, that's a bit more interesting, or a bit feels more like fantasy to me. So fantasy romance, I'll put it in I love it. And why I won't put it in superb, because I still haven't read a fantasy romance that I really love. I like the idea of it, like the concept of romantic story in a fantasy world should be my favorite, because I love romantic stories and I love fantasy. But I just haven't found that one right book. I have bought actually a few fantasy romance books and a few romantic books that I still have to read, so maybe I will discover that book there. Maybe I will make another video talking about fantasy romance and what I like and don't like about it. Hope I will discover one that I really like and I will share it with you, because yeah, I've bought a lot of those books. That's it for this video. I'm trying to post new video each week, and I make tier ranking of fantasy tropes and of romantic tropes, so you can check those out. I also made some vlogs about reading the Stormlight Archive if you're interested. I'm right now trying to finish the 4th book. Maybe I will be already finished with it by the time you're watching this. So if you want to see the vlog about it, or my vlogs about Way of Kings or World of Radiance, you can find them on my channel. And thank you for watching. I will see you again soon. Bye!